that we had an absolute legal right to build this mine, the political process kept us from being able to build this mine for 12 years. The free cash flow associated with that mine at the gold price that existed at the time that we made the discovery was worth about $700 million. My math isn't good enough to tell you what the net present value of losing access to $700 million at a 10% discount over 13 years is. But I suspect that those of us who were shareholders and discovered that mine lost the sunny side of $500 million. And people suggest to me that the Congo is risky. In addition to the fact that we didn't have access to the cash flow during that period of time, we had to pay $16 million in bribes. These weren't the efficient kind of bribes that you might pay in the Congo, where you got payment for services rendered. My old friend Adolphe Landin once said his definition of an honest politician was a son of a bitch who stayed bribed. A little harsh, perhaps, but accurate. These were very different types of bribes. These were contributions of property in lieu, campaign contributions, some truly farcical stuff. I mean, some stuff I actually got value for over time. I didn't realize I could get value for them. But as an example, there was a critter there, or there was alleged to be a critter there at least, a desert tortoise. Everybody here sort of familiar with desert tortoises? They're little reptiles, sort of like Volkswagen Beetles. You know, I mean, nice things, nice things. And of course, I don't think the environmentalists actually cared about these tortoises. They were a tool to use on us. But that notwithstanding, that was part of the rule of law. And so we had to send out these herpetologists, nice guys, by the way, to look for tortoises. And these were young, hardworking, diligent herpetologists. But despite the fact that they had all these attributes, they couldn't find any tortoises. Well, that wasn't good enough. The response came that tortoises were sometimes subterranean, so we couldn't look for these tortoises on the ground because they might be underground, and given that we were going to mine underground, we could hurt them there. Okay. So we got some other herpetologists, and by the way, they tried to fabricate a motorized skateboard to go in these burrows of the camera. I mean, some really, truly bizarre things happened. They're fun to talk about, but they were very expensive. Anyway, they couldn't find any tortoises there either. But that wasn't the end of it. The fact that they couldn't find any tortoises, but that this was known tortoise territory, meant that tortoises might be able later to walk into a mine site and get hurt by these big trucks. No doubt, by the way, that they would get hurt if they got hit by a big truck. So, the political solution that we agreed on, and this is where I got my money's worth actually, because I'd be able to tell stories like this for the next 20 years. The political solution that was forced on us, that the powers that be on our side had the good sense to accept, I was outraged, but at least it got done. The political solution that we agreed on is that we surrounded the whole mine site with a tortoise fence. Got up to here. Now, those of you who don't know about tortoises will just have to take it on faith that these things don't climb well. They don't fly for shit. These little things. What they do reasonably well is burrow, as they had pointed out to us before, because they wanted us to look in burrows. There was no requirement that we bury any of this fence. The second critter issue that we faced was something called, I'm not making this up, by the way. On my honor as a stockbroker, this is all. There's another critter there called a Mexican mine bat. And this Mexican mine bat, well, they're not endangered exactly, there's just not very many of them. And the reason that there aren't very many of them in California is because there's no good terrain for them. They like caves. And the Southern California deserts don't have any caves, except old mine shafts. And so prior mining activity on this property had left mine shafts. And these bats had colonized these mine shafts. Now, heaven forbid that mining disturb critters. By the way, foreign critters, alien critters, weeds. You know, critters that were encroaching on territory as a consequence of human intervention. But anyway, heaven forbid that these critters be disturbed. So we had to hire these other guys. And nice guys, by the way. People in these agencies are invariably nice people. They really are. Batologists, I don't know what they call those people, but they're people who do bats. And so The idea was that we had to get these bats out of harm's way. And, you know, bats are pretty shifty. They do better in the dark than we do. So moving these bats was a real challenge. And it ended up that we put these mist nets out, and people clapped their hands, and the bats got all freaked out, flew into the mist nets. We gathered them all up, and we took them to other shafts, 17 or 18 miles away, put them in those shafts, and then at night, they do what you expect. They came home. This cycle went on a couple times, and the batologist said to us, listen, this is really disturbing the bats. And we suspect that when construction activities commence, that the bats will leave. Could you put that in writing? And yes, I'm telling this story to amuse you, but I'm also telling you this story to illustrate the fact that political risk is greatest from the government that touches you the most. How many people here live in British Columbia? A lot of you. So I was addressing an investment conference yesterday and the day before, talking about political risk. And we were talking about various places that scared Canadians, in particular, of course, recently, Argentina. How many people lived in the province of British Columbia the last time the NDP got elected? Fair number of you. Do you remember that as a good time for mining? Anybody here remember that as a good time for mining? Let's go one province to the east. You know, the sort of bastion of free enterprise, Alberta. Do you remember the last time natural gas prices rose? 5, 6 years ago? The response of the provincial governments, the conservatives, the free enterprise people, was to just about double the gas royalty, causing us to call it Albertistan. Now, despite that, I'm supposed to be concerned about political risk in places like Congo or Russia or Kazakhstan. So one of the things that I'd like to leave you with in the context of this is that it isn't so much political risk that you need to be worried about in your investments. It's your own method of interpreting what political risk is and the price that you pay to either accept or insure yourself against political risk. It's funny that it stands to reason that people don't employ the test on themselves. I'm going to make some general discussions about our attitude towards money and things like that later, but I want to continue on this vein for a little while because I think it's important. There's other people here who are much better at describing for you the philosophical and ethical aspects of today's discussion. I want to go right straight to your greed and larceny, so that I can keep your attention. Another interesting thing that happens, and happens more among non-libertarian communities than libertarian communities, but there is this sense in the securities business, in the investment business, that the government protects you. That this whole apparatus of the state, the whole regulatory regime surrounding the investment business serves some useful purpose. What people do, I suspect, when they call up me and they ask me to act as a broker or a money manager, is they're willing to exchange fees in order for me to take responsibility for something they should take responsibility for, which is their own wealth. And if they can get that for free, if they can cause the government to do it, as opposed to paying me to do it, so much the better. There is a conception out there on many people's parts, including many libertarians, that as a consequence of regulation, that the investment business or the investment process is safer. And I would argue to you that exactly the opposite is true. The presence of the regulation, and particularly the fact that people like you and others rely on the protection of the regulator, makes you much less wary. The best steward of your wealth, including in an interaction with somebody like me, who you at least should trust and respect, the best steward of your wealth is you. And anything at all that detracts from you exercising your own intelligence, your own prejudice, your own work in defending your own capital is counterproductive. Now, it's come to the point where those agencies are especially counterproductive as a consequence of their institutional response to their own failings. My friend Doug Casey may have stolen this phrase from somewhere else, but 20 years ago in a speech he gave, he referred to the big regulator in our country, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC.